Gregory Austin, Tom Hitchcock. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. How you doing, Tom?
Not too bad. That's an open fire I see in the background.
It's a very convincing fake fire. It's a little chilly here in Kansas City. We've had some cold snaps, and I'm down in my home office in the downstairs, so it gets a little cooler. So it kind of makes a nice little bit of heat, little warm atmosphere as well. I like it.
Yeah, I like it. Well, that gave me the segue which I was hoping for, to try and pinpoint the accent. Okay, so Kansas City is where you are right now. What time is it there now?
So it is 5:02 p.m. on
Okay.
Thursday. Yeah. How about you? What time is it for you in Sydney?
10 a.m. 10:02,
Okay.
obviously.
All right, not bad, not bad. Okay, that's a good. I wasn't sure if it was earlier than that, so this is not too early for you. It's not bad.
This is good timing, and I can let you know what tomorrow's like. I can say, let you know if Friday's any good.
Yeah, right. That's right. It is tomorrow there. I forget about that. Yeah. So you guys are coming into the end of your summer, right? And we're getting to the end of
We
our
just
winter.
we just entered autumn. Yeah,
Okay.
so one week
Wow.
into autumn. We've got a cyclone here in Australia at the moment, up in
Oh, wow.
Queensland, not where I am, but the weather's had a bit of a turn here as well. So I don't know if do you know Australia well?
I know about it. I have it's on my bucket list. Haven't been. I almost went when I was 2 years old. Actually, my dad had a job. He was a broadcaster in Brisbane, and they had it all set up. And then the job and the place to live fell through just before they got on the plane, so they had to stay in the States. Otherwise, I'd have a very similar accent, probably.
Yeah, well, I'm actually British with a bit of an Australian twang now of recent
Ah,
years.
okay.
So
All
how
right.
weird is that? So if it wasn't you broadcasting now from Kansas, your dad would have
Hmm.
been broadcasting from Brisbane in the cyclone we just spoke about.
There you go.
There we are. Anyway, all right, we're chewing the
Yeah.
fat. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Gregory. What is it you do with your time?
Wow. So I'm currently a business development director for a company called Solarion, and we're a phase one clinical conduct and bioanalytical CRO contract research organization. So we help biotech and pharma companies get their, really get their compounds off the ground and into the clinic on their way towards hopefully registration and into therapies and helping people.
Okay, all right. So I like the way you dumbed it down for an idiot like me at the end there. But let's treat me like an idiot for the whole of this rest of this episode then, and you probably won't be far from the truth. But let's explain that so that we can fully understand exactly what you do and what this means into our everyday lives.
Right. So, I mean, all the medicines that you take, whether it's something simple as aspirin or ibuprofen or something more serious like a chemotherapy or other cancer treatments, they have to go through a very rigorous testing process, and before they can even be considered going onto the market. And so what we do is we will help really with a company who wants to get this in the clinic and try and first of all just test, hey, what's the right dose? How is this going to work? Is this enough to be effective, and is it safe? And so we'll recruit healthy volunteers into our clinic, and they will, for a fee, they get paid pretty well actually to do that. There's actually people who are career subjects for clinical trials, believe it or not, and they just go from clinic to clinic doing this. And so they'll take that, and we'll get that information. We'll take it upstairs to our lab, and then we'll analyze what it's doing in the body, where it's going in the body, how it's distributing, how long it stays in the body. Is it effective? Is it causing any issues? And then that all gets reported to the FDA, and they decide whether or not they can take it to the phase 2 and then phase 3 and then on to registration.
Okay, so with something like that, my question is about the long-term effects. Okay, so what's
Sure.
the time frame? What's the time frame where it's like where it's decided it's safe for the open market?
It can take years to go through the full process because it takes a lot of planning up front, and you have to do recruiting, you have to set up the clinic, everything has to be done, per FDA, or if you're doing it in Europe, EMA regulations, so that you can keep track of all the data to make sure everything is actually real and safe and appropriate. Sometimes compounds die in phase 1 or phase 2. Sometimes you make it all the way to phase 3. The data looks good. You finally get a big group of people. That's when you have a large subset of individuals who have whatever disease case it is. They go through and they do it, and the data doesn't turn out, or it's just not good enough to worth marketing. And so that's why R&D is so expensive, and that's why drugs can be so expensive, because it takes up to $1 billion now to get a drug to registration, and it can take about 10 years.
Wow, and it makes sense, isn't it? It's one of those things. You want to be safe with these things, and you want to know how effective it is, and the variables as well. How do your regulations compare to other countries?
I would say the FDA and the EMA are very, very similar. So there's a lot of harmonization. Health Canada isn't very different. I don't know is Australia Health as well, but I'd say it's fairly compatible, because I know a lot of clinical trials are being done in Australia, and so it's pretty compatible across most of the major countries.
Okay, and your role with this, so you do you do the recruitment? Do you do the chemical side of it? Tell us a little bit more about your input.
So, and I'm going to back up a little bit, tell you a little bit more about my story, kind of how I got into this. Because I started many years ago when I was in graduate school in developmental psychology and psychophysiology. And I fancied myself a professor. And I thought this was going to be great. And I was really into it, and I enjoyed the program. But I had a family young and realized that behavioral science doesn't really pay. And I was going to spend a lot of money into getting a PhD and then not really be able to afford to pay that back or support a family. So I got into business, went into business intelligence, quickly got out of that, got into sales. So I sold in telecom and into data center sales. And then that market crashed after 9/11. And so I had to pivot, got out of business, looked into getting into the Air Force and their OTC program as an officer. And I was 2 inches away from launching my career in the Air Force when the entire branch decided that if you're not a computer science major and if you're not an engineer, you're out. So I was out, and I'm like, okay, now I got to punt again. Now what do I do? And I had a friend who was in the FBI and law enforcement, and he convinced me that'd be a pretty cool career. So I looked into that. Stepping stone would be to become a police officer first. So I did that. I was a street cop in Savannah, Georgia, in the dirty South for 3 years, chasing bad guys, and got out of that, moved to Maryland. I was hired in marketing with a real estate brokerage, and then the real estate market crashed. I mean, you could kind of predict what industry was going to tank, because that was the one I was in, seemed like. So then we kind of get into where I got into the biotech industry. My dad got sick. He had melanoma many years before, was fine for 17 years. Then all of a sudden had a brain tumor, and it was operable. It's kind of right here. They were able to get it out. The tumor was probably about golf ball size, but there's a huge hematoma around it. So it was quite a bit of pressure that he was experiencing. Successful surgery, was doing great. I actually moved in to help my mom. She was all about 5 foot and $110 and needed help, just kind of taking care of him as he recovered. So I was happy to be in a place in my life I could do that. And so I'm helping him. I'm kind of bored. He's doing well. And so I ended up finding a guy who ran a recruiting agency, and that's how I got into recruiting. He taught me everything I knew about agency recruiting and how to recruit and how to find good clients and so forth. Tom Scholl, great guy. And I decided to get into biotech pharma science because selfishly, I wanted to find some clinical trials for my dad. And well, I did find some neuroscientists. Unfortunately, especially at that time, I mean, this is 17 years ago, there was really nothing anyone could do. It was just a death sentence, and it was just a matter of time, unfortunately. But that's how I launched my career into that. I did that for about 2 or 3 years, and then we had another economic correction. ended up working for a nonprofit called the Boston Society and basically put on scientific symposia for 3 years. And that's how I got to meet tons of these great scientific leaders. And what I loved about that part of the industry, because I'd been in business, you know how it is. It's cutthroat, it's competitive, it's intense, but you would have people that are with Merck or with Pfizer, with BMS or with GSK, and you wouldn't know. You'd think they're all in the same company because they're very collegial. They're all trying to work together to make drugs safe and effective. And because they want drugs that, you know, you can take and their kids can take and their parents can take. And in fact, there's some cases I know people that they have family members on the very drugs they helped get to market, which is kind of wild. So I did that as a nonprofit. It was time to move on and make some more money. I got back into recruiting, did recruiting for about 9 years. I wrote a book, Stellar Resume Writing, Secrets from a Corporate Recruiter. And I self-published that on Amazon, which was just something I wanted to do, man. It was a lot of fun, went through that process and stayed in recruiting for a little while, got back into the pharma biotech industry and consulting and recruited there. And then I pivoted into sales. So I sold consulting services for a couple of companies. And then I started a podcast called BioTalk Unzipped. And it's just something I wanted to do, man. I love talking to people. I love the science. And I asked my first guest, Chad Briscoe, I said, hey, will you be on the show? This is what I'm trying to do. He's like, yeah, I would love to. I enjoy that. He goes, Greg, let me tell you something. I've done this kind of thing before. How would you feel about a co-host? And it was an easy decision. I've known Chad for years, great guy. And now we partner as co-hosts on this show. We've done it for a little over a year, and we bring on scientific innovators and leaders and technology guys and just great people in the industry that have an interesting story to tell, just kind of unzipping those stories behind medical progress. And the feel is kind of like this, you know, we're having a conversation over a beer at a pub and talking about science. Okay. That's kind of the feel of it. And I just did it because I wanted to do something different. I want to be looked at as a thought leader, not as a sales guy. Someone who's in the know and who wants to help make this industry better and make people's lives better. And then Chad kind of got me into what he was doing over at Solarion, brought me in, and that's where I am today.
Yeah, well, okay. I do like your gentle nod to if it's a sector that's going to crash, you're probably going to work in it.
So I think I've finally broken that curse. I've been out of that for a good 10 years now. And so, knock on wood. Yeah.
But that was quite an interesting story. So you'll know as well as I do, when you put your recruiter hat on and you listen to someone's career background, it's fascinating. And it says a lot about the person, circumstances, and their why and how they operate. Your story alone is probably worth 2 or 3 other people's full career, because there's all sorts in there, from public to private, events to and what have you, and it essentially pulls on so many different attributes that there's very much some left brain, right brain industries in there, where you're putting on this strength and that strength. I think take the economy and circumstance out of the equation and your history with these sectors, which one of them best suited your skill set?
That's a great question, because I have done a variety of things. I would have to say these kind of more complex consultative sales is where I shine the most, because I still get to know people, get to use some of my recruiting background in terms of being curious, asking good questions, but I also love the science. And I get the opportunity, being in this role, to hear about what's groundbreaking, what's coming out, what's brand new, and helping hopefully get that to market or bring that to light. And so that's where plus I get to do some of these other things like podcasting and writing that I enjoy. And that's where I see my retirement, quite frankly. I don't intend to fully ever retire. I may stop working for, the man, if you will, and working for a company, and just continue podcasting, speaking, writing books, and just helping people where I can.
Okay. Well, Love it. Okay. All right. And do you think that maybe the PhD, the professor title, might resurface now things are a little bit more settled for you?
Hmm. I would love to do that. I don't think it's realistic, because I know how intense and how hard it is to be in that program. I lived it. I think my last semester at the University of Florida probably averaged about 2, 3 hours a night because I was in the middle of a research program. I was teaching for the first time. I was taking classes. It was very intense. I could do that in my 20s. I couldn't do that in my mid 50s. It would take me 10, 20 years just to get the PhD probably at the pace that I could do it. If I could do it full time, I could probably hang in there, but I would love to do that, but I don't think it's probably going to happen.
Okay. And your podcast, is it still happening now?
Yeah, we've been doing it. We got through our first year. We're in season 2, and just continue to go strong. And we've done a couple of on location sites now, and we're going to do a third one probably sometime in the next quarter or so in New Jersey to highlight Steam Park, which is a really cool nonprofit in Philly that really helps kids, especially kids who don't have as much access to good education, to get them those STEM opportunities in science and engineering and technology. And it's really cool to see those kids really get excited about learning those things.
Good. Well, feel free to promote your podcast through this as well. You're more than welcome to. Okay, and I've got a bit of a sort of off-center question for you, then, and I'm not sure if it will touch the nerve or not, but we'll give it a go.
Yeah. Hit me.
Okay, Donald Trump. Okay, so he's in power, and I'm not asking which side of the fence you are. That bit I know definitely will hit a nerve, and I don't want to annoy people, but
right,
we can see his effects on world politics right now. Okay, but on the basis of what we see externally from America. Okay, how's everything being received, and how's the effect of that happening in the States?
It mixed. I think it's, for most people, it's either love or hate. I think the hardest thing for people to swallow is seeing someone who was not elected with so much power and influence over our government. And so what Elon Musk is doing, to be honest, there's some probably fat that needed to be cut. I think there was probably a lot of waste in governments. And so I get that is just his methodology is pretty crazy. It's like people are not people, they're just a commodity, and whatever, you don't matter. If you don't work 20 hours a day, you're shit to me. It's kind of the feel to it. And so that doesn't rest well with a lot of people, but it's not necessarily all bad. Well, we'll see how it fleshes out. It's been in my industry, we haven't felt it yet in terms of how it's affecting the FDA. Is it going to take longer to get drugs approved because there's less people to review? That we just don't know yet. So we'll see how that affects. What concerns me the most is what's happened with the NIH, the National Institute of Health. I've worked with them in the past. They're an amazing organization. There's really wonderful, dedicated people, and their mission is just, this is for them. They're funding research no one else can fund, right? You have let's say you're in academia and you have this remarkable cancer fighting agent, but you have no money, you don't have access to get the fundraising. You could work potentially with the NIH if you're doing things right, and they could fund that research, bring clinical trials into their hospital there in DC and run that. And for some people, if you listen to those stories, that's their last chance. They're dying and they're willing to take a chance on whatever experimental drug they can get their hands on. And so I hope that doesn't alter their mission or slow things down for them. So it's hard to know because I'm not in each one of those to see how that is going to affect. I'm really curious because I've heard, some responses from Europe. And I know some of the Europeans are like, well, I don't know what's going on over there. I don't know if we want to send samples over to the US. I mean, things are kind of sketchy. What is your perspective? Not that you speak for an entire country, but, how is it being received in Australia?
So it's interesting because I think I would imagine or presume it'd be the same in the States where there's two sets of media, okay,
Mm-hmm.
spinning
Mm-hmm.
two sets of narratives, okay, and there is a bit of a mainstream, and then there's the other side as well, and I don't know, perhaps. I'm a dad. My son's 10 years old, and I teach him to question everything.
Good.
Okay, just don't take something as gospel. You know, the same
Mm-hmm.
spirit as being a scientist. You got a theory, put it to test, see how robust it is. Okay, you might be wrong, you might be right. We don't know until you do something, but question and experiment. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
which means if you go on mainstream news is a really good example of that. Let's question everything. Let's not just take that as is. So if the Europeans are saying this, okay, let's have a little look at this and let's lift the bonnet up a bit. So I do feel there's quite a distinct narrative against him because he's quite easy to pick on, how he carries
Right.
himself and what have you. But I do see a lot of good happening as well. Okay, and I think he's breaking down some sort of more conventional things that are not necessarily serving in your case the states, and he seems to be a lot more focused on the states now and keeping things insular
Mm-hmm.
than being the world police, for once better terminology. Okay,
Right.
which is probably a good thing for the states, but obviously in the grand scheme of things, maybe not. But it's really, so I feel we're getting a similar narrative to you guys are. It depends. It's almost like your opinion is shaped on what channel you tune into.
Mm-hmm.
Not
Right.
careful.
It is. And it's hard for me. And I think there's a lot of Americans who maybe feel this way. I'm about as moderate as they come. You know, I see pros and cons on the left. I see pros and cons on the right. I don't think any side is particularly right or wrong. There's just some policies are good, some policies aren't so good. Some positive changes. We needed more security at our borders. You know, the last administration really failed in that area, very clearly failed. So I like seeing some of that. I don't necessarily agree with some of the hard line policies of how they're going about it. It's like, oh, you're born here, but your parents weren't. Well, you may not be able to stay. Well, that's okay. Good luck with that. That's that's been a thing for a long time. And I don't know legally how you can change that, but there's a lot of that going on. Same thing with the FDA. You know, I've gotten to meet a number of reviewers and investigators and high-level people at the FDA, not high level, but, you know, people who are in management, great people. They really care about public health. They're not trying to make things difficult for industry to get things done, but they're committed to making it safe. And if you can work with them, they'll work with you. And then it usually works out okay if you have good data and it works, right? So what I don't understand on the other side of things, outside of pharma, on the food side, it boggles my mind where most of the world will cut out things, all these chemicals and the red 40s and it causes cancer. Well, it's okay in America. We're feeding this to our kids. Every candy has red 40. And it's like, it's okay. And so RFK Jr., and I hope he does something about this, to be honest, because that's one thing I really agree with. We should not, there's a lot of things that should be banned from our food supply. And it's really scary that it's in there, quite frankly. And we don't know how much problems it's causing people, whether it's cancer or other disease conditions. But he's, you know, boy, that guy's on the fringe. I don't know about him, but I hope he can fix at least that part of it and catch up with the rest of the world who's like, oh, you know, we're going to use natural coloring instead of these chemicals that we don't know what they'll do to you.
It is fascinating because obviously America is famous for having some very questionable components in the food, and and it really does make you wonder. But when you see old adverts where there's arsenic in this and there's cocaine in that, or whatever,
anything goes. Does it make money? Great, we'll take it. You know?
It's comical. We can laugh at it now, but we're still in that state. You know, we go 50 years ahead, they'll be laughing at we were still feeding this to our kids and ourselves, obviously. It's I don't think we have truly evolved to learn that lesson yet.
Right. And I hope that we can keep going back to the science, one of the first things, I did in my podcast, I actually interviewed Chad, just asked him a bunch of questions. And then we started bringing on guests. And one of the things I asked him was what surprised you the most? And he's like, one was the bad decisions people make in biotech when it seems pretty clear what the right answer is. But it's also, he was disappointed in how science has got politicized, especially during COVID. And it's like, people don't realize how hard these scientists work and how much they care. And to call them a conspiracy is just laughable to us. And so I coined the phrase, it's like, science is not a conspiracy. It's like, it's not. It's science, and if it's a conspiracy, it's not science. It's very factual and straightforward. You can test it or you can't. And so I hope we stay away from politicizing that and just stick to what we know.
That's a very fair point as well, isn't it? Because obviously people use the term science in their marketing quite a bit, backed by science. This is based on science, etc., etc., etc. And it's a point of reference for validity, if you like, and quality. But if we politicize things, as you're quite right, which is there, then we're doing it an injustice, that's for sure. Okay. Before we wrap up then, because we're coming to a close now, someone listening to you, they want to get in contact with you or know a bit more, they want to engage you in some capacity. What would be the best way for them to reach out to you, Gregory?
LinkedIn is the number one way to get a hold of me. And that'll be, you can just look me up, Gregory Austin. And I've got a pretty decent following, so hopefully I'll pop up somewhere in there. But yeah, just send me and please, when you send me a contact request or an invite, tell me a little bit of something about yourself and why. I get so many. LinkedIn used to be a great platform. I still like it a lot. I don't love it as much as I used to because it's just being overused and overrun by people just spamming, and now AI bots and you link in, connect with somebody you think is going to be, someone nice to know. And then before you even get to say hi, they're already pitching you something. And nobody likes that. And yet it happens constantly. So now I'm really careful about who I connect with because I don't want to waste my time with that sort of silliness.
Yeah, I agree. We're all on the receiving end of them. I think that the rule with that is, what would you think if you received that same interaction yourself, So if it is that instantaneous message, you simply can't type that quick.
Yeah, right.
And it's not personal, clearly out of context, and that how would that make you feel? Well, I ignore it, I archive it, I deconnect. It's talk about first impressions. Then it's not the right thing to be doing,
Absolutely. And that brings me to a couple of parting thoughts I would like to leave, with your audience. And that's when it comes to the use of something like a LinkedIn or even in-person networking. And I don't even know if I want to call it networking anymore because sometimes networking gets a bad rap because it's like, oh, I'm trying to use you to get to somewhere, to get to a job or get to somebody else. And it's about relationship building, build your circle, build whatever you call it, your community of relationships and look to see what you can do for them before you even think about what you want, when asking something. And it's something I've been talking about for a long time. And then I came across the book, Never Eat Alone, and it really validated what I've been saying, because that's exactly the tone of the book. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's brilliant in that area. It's all about having fun, having real authentic relationships, and just doing something out of the kindness of your heart to help people, and good things always come about. So never stop building those relationships. Good things will come to you.
What a wonderful way to sign off an episode. Brilliant. Thank you very much, Gregory. And I'm sure we'll speak again soon.
Sounds good. My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Tom.